What you watch depends on what kind of mood you're in. Sometimes you're craving comedies like Friends or South Park, and sometimes you're more into dramas like HBO's Succession and House of the Dragon. There's also cooking shows like Chopped and Beat Bobby Flay, and even movies like The Lord of the Rings and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Well, Max is the streaming destination that has the best of entertainment for whatever mood you're in anytime. And plans start at as little as $9.99 a month. Max, the one to watch. Subscription required. Visit max.com.
Imagine you're looking at a balancing scale with everything you do for other people on one side and everything you do for yourself on the other side. If it isn't balanced, maybe it's time to spend a little more time on you. And therapy is a great place to start. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online who can help you find that balance and stick to it. Visit BetterHelp.com/positive to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/positive.
Jacob Albrocht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
And happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Sports Daily. Jacob Albrocht, Tommy Castor with you right here on KFH. You can find us on our video stream. Appreciate everybody tuning in there. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all covered for you. You've got the IHOP hotline open for you. 869-1240 is that IHOP hotline. I'm back, baby, for a few days before a little bit more travel, and then that's it for me. If I sound tired and exhausted, it is one of those need a vacation from a vacation kind of situations. But we're here without fail. When I leave town over the last, 7-8 years, major things happen. That's what happened this time. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be back. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in like 2 weeks, over 2 weeks. We haven't been together in a long time. So glad to be here. Glad to have you back and looking forward to getting into it.
It has been nuts trying to be on the road. So I have been out on the West Coast. We took the kids to Disneyland, which was great, but it's a lot. And for some reason, like my cell phone decides out on the West Coast, it doesn't want to work very well. So I've been like battling this lack of internet and trying to keep up with all these stories and chase 3 kids around Disneyland and do all of these things. It's been nuts. Tommy's got a newborn. We're both running on fumes here. That's all right. That's how we roll. If we say crazy things, we'll blame it on that. It's no big deal.
Sure.
How'd everything go last week? How's anything big happen?
There were a couple different things that happened last week. Paul and I think we covered them pretty well, but looking forward to hearing your take on some of these big-time events that happened last week. But, yeah, I mean, today is my first full day back at the office. Did the show last week with Paul from home, and so, that was fun. There was a day, and I don't remember, it might have been Wednesday, where, you've got a newborn and we've got a toddler, and there were doctor's appointments and different things like that conflicted with the show. So there was a day where I was on newborn duty, and so he was literally right off camera during the show. And then at one point he started to cry, and so I'm holding him as I'm hosting the second hour of the show. It was just a lot of scrambling and trying to make sure that things were covered, but we got through it okay, and here we are on a Monday.
All the more reason sometimes to catch us on our video stream if you can, because sometimes things get interesting here. It's been a lot going on in the sports world. So, what we'll do today is we'll recap some of that. I know some of these are topics that certainly opinions have been formed and made, so we'll get into some of that. Those would include, the new hire for Wichita State Baseball, the new big merger in golf, as we have as storybook and ending to a tournament yesterday as we've had all year. We've, of course, got the NBA Finals, a potential series clincher tonight. The big news over the weekend for us here locally is Arthur Kaluma, the big-time transfer from Creighton, chooses KState and sort of transforms a class, I think, a little bit. So we'll take a little bit of a look at K-State's roster. Jerome Tang makes a huge splash there. So we'll get into all of those things. All kinds of different things to get into today with you. Your calls on the IHOP hotline, always appreciated. Tommy, let's start with Wichita State Baseball because that's the one that seems to have the most run, I suppose. And you guys had a chance to talk to Brian Green last week. I have not talked to Brian Green yet. All of this has sort of happened in the last week since I've been gone, but we know that all the players are transferring, and then the big news we see last night and into this morning, Peyton Tolley decides to transfer out of Wichita State. We had sort of felt like he was sticking around, but that is not the case. He is now in the portal as well. So that's just about everybody there. And I think that, we got to kind of go back a little bit before we can go forward, at least because I haven't been here and it'll give me a chance to sort of digest all of this. But it's going to be essentially a total restart here in Brian Green. Now, I don't know what sort of damage can be done inside the portal to put a roster together for next year. I don't know. And here's the thing with baseball. When we do this with basketball, it's much easier for me to sit here and be like, here's what needs to happen. Here's a relatively sane timeline to consider on a return to, what needs to be there. I don't know what to expect on this one. I don't know much about the credentials of college baseball coaches. I know that Brian Green and Kevin Saul clearly had a relationship heading into this. I also know that's not unusual at all for anybody that, wants to, scream like, oh, you can't do that just because. Yeah, you can. I mean, Gene Taylor hired Chris Kleiman because he knew Chris Kleiman. It happens all the time. Like, familiarity is nothing. It happens in the real world, too, by the way. If you got a promotion, you'd probably like to bring along with you anybody that helped you have success. So that part of it doesn't bother me at all. I don't understand credentials in college baseball. I thought Eric Wedge was going to be a home run hire, right? I love that hire. That hire didn't work out at all. It was a disaster in a lot of ways. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, these credentials aren't what need to be there, because I honestly, I don't know. I have no idea. Expectations, I know it's got to be better. And I've struggled with this a lot because I, like you, Tommy, and like a lot of people, could feel this intangible progress last season. It's not tangible because they didn't finish that strong, right? 5 games over 500, and it's certainly not back to the postseason, which is where they need to be, which is where they haven't really been in the last decade. One time in the last 14 years, never a better finish than 3rd in the AAC. And they've had some really talented players, case in point last year, but you go back to some of those Todd Butler years where they had, first-round draft picks and all these things, and for whatever reason, the winning isn't coming. And I think because of that, people aren't going to the games. So the part of this I've struggled with as it pertains to Lauren Hibbs and the direction of the program and Kevin Saul's decision is, yeah, I did feel that progress. And, yeah, I've been on record to say I would have liked to see, like a very short maybe deal for Hibbs. Again, that's without as much knowledge on the situation. But, yeah, I think that you could definitely warrant that. But the bottom line was people still weren't coming to the games. So everyone that, is screaming from the rooftops of like, oh, this was going so well. Did you go to any games? Were you there? Because ultimately, and I'm not blaming you if you didn't. That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just saying is you have to make that sort of decision. That has to be a part of the process. Like, the buzz has to be recreated. And if it wasn't happening, then, that's fine. And also, I know that this is a priority for Kevin Saul. The first time we talked to Kevin Saul, whether it was on Sports Sunday for television, on the TV side of things, or here on Sports Daily, baseball was brought up early and often in that conversation. So I think there has been some sort of plan for a while, and here we go. Is it Brian Green? I have no idea about Brian Green's credentials. I'm not going to give you a take on that because I have no clue. I don't know college baseball that way. What I do know is it's been a long time since Wichita State baseball has been any good. And they got to get good again. They've got too good of facilities. They've got all of the things there. And for whatever reason, the buzz around that program has not been there. I've been here for a decade, hadn't been here since I've been here. And that seems crazy to me as you watch the College World Series and these regionals play out right now, because that's been there and was there for so long for Wichita State. So get it back there. The decisions themselves, there's been a lot about, these player transfers and whether they wouldn't happen or would have happened. And, I've heard things and you've heard things, Tommy, and, I don't know. But what I do know is it wasn't working holistically. Whether it was on the right path, I think, is the point of conversation. But, the end result hasn't been there in a really long time for Wichita State baseball.
Yeah, I've been torn on this, for quite a while because, I did feel like there was some intangible growth this season. I mean, we were having conversations back in March as this team was battling for first place in the conference and, had a late season slide for sure, did not have a good showing in the conference tournament. And then Kevin Saul made the choice to not retain Lauren Hibbs and go out and bring in Brian Green. And like you mentioned, we talked to Brian Green on the show on Thursday, and I'm torn on this too because I thought he was a good interview. I thought he was sharp. I felt like he was articulate. I felt like he was intelligent. I felt like he had all of those, sort of attributes, that you get done with an interview and you're like, okay, I can kind of see this a little bit. But I also know that he's got quite a bit of work in front of him with an entire roster in the portal. And now Peyton Tolley, who was the one, I guess, saving grace, the one guy that I think you could cling on to a glimmer of hope, from the team and the roster from last season. And now he's in the portal too. And Green talked about, during his press conference and then during interviews afterwards about that was priority number one, was keeping Peyton Tolley in Wichita. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So, unfortunately, that one glimmer of hope that at least I had is no longer there anymore. And that doesn't mean that Green can't get it back. It just means that the cards are stacked against him, I think, a little bit. The deck is stacked against him. He's got a lot of work to do, and I think he can build a roster, right? There are enough baseball players out there to build a roster. At what level of success? I don't know. This is a guy that, you want to talk about getting Wichita State back to the championship mode where they had been for years and years and years. Brian Green, for as good of an interview as he is, and how I think a lot of people really want to have a lot of hope in him, he's not a championship winning coach. He never has been, during the course of his career. He's won a couple of conference championships in the WAC and, different places like that when he was at New Mexico State and Washington State. He's never taken a team to the College World Series. And so there's not a track record there that you can point to or hang on to and say, this is absolutely the guy who's going to get Wichita State back to the promised land. Doesn't mean he can't do it. I'd like to have hope and optimism that he can, but right now there's very, very little to hang on to.
Yeah, I that's what, and that I agree, and that's what makes it hard for me. Like, college baseball. Here's the reality for me, and I think for almost everybody else. No, you didn't know who Brian Green was before he took the job. You probably didn't know who anybody else was either. Like, how many college baseball coaches right now, Tommy, do you think you could say, I know that coach coaches that team? I'm gonna be blatantly obvious. Zero. I don't know anybody. Is Augie Garrido still the coach at Texas? I don't think so. Honestly, I don't know any. Zero. So it's not like when we did this with college basketball, where we have some fairly strong takes, right, on different coaches and their credentials and, who brings what to the table. I don't know any of these guys. I don't. So I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, X, Y, or Z is better than X, Y, or Z. I have no idea. I mean, you just saw a coach hired from Oral Roberts in basketball, and it didn't take long to quickly know something about what that program's been, the players that have been there. Maybe you didn't know his name before the end of the year, but you can quickly look at it and say, okay, here's why that's good. Here's why that's bad. I can't do that with college baseball. I just don't know. So at that point, it's just sort of whatever to me. It's more about, like, holistically the decision to take a different direction than what you've been for the last 3 years, 4 years, I suppose, with Eric Wedge, because that's what you're doing. It's probably not fair to Lauren Hibbs to tie him to the Eric Wedge hire, but he's tied to the Eric Wedge hire.
Sure.
And so that's more of the change that's happening. Here's the other part of it that because Peyton Tolley stings, right? He's one of the best, if not the best, two-way player in the country. And I like some of the other guys on the roster, too, that are leaving. At the same time, they finished 5 games over 500. So like the guys on the roster didn't perform at a high enough level anyway. So it's not like, you lost a College World Series caliber team. And I don't mean this as any offense to those guys. I hate that those players transferred because there's a lot of young, really interesting talent on the team. Just saying, like, we can't pretend like things were going so well last year. They weren't. They stumbled down the stretch. There was a collapse. They didn't win the league. They didn't reach the postseason, right? So that makes all of this more difficult to me because it sucks when you have to make a change almost all of the time because you become fond of coaches and players because you're watching them and you root for them and you cheer for them. And that's what makes it so difficult. And that's why these are such high-stakes decisions for Kevin Saul to make, not just with baseball, but with women's basketball now and with men's basketball and all of these changes that have been made. Like, there's a lot of risk in all of these because, what is the future? I think the risk in baseball is different than the risk in basketball, right? Or in men's basketball, I'll say, because there is a clear, like, year one to me, and we talked about it ad nauseum here, a clear year one expectation that has to be reached, right, or that needs to be reached right away in college men's basketball right now because of the transfer portal and how quickly you can build a roster and what Wichita State has been very recently. In baseball, it's not that way. Like, Wichita State Baseball hasn't been a relevant program nationally. I mean, how long has it been? It's hard for me to say.
It's been over a decade. It's been over a decade.
Because it's like my entire time here, they have not been that. And, when you look just down the street and see this wild and crazy success for softball that you want to emulate, like, immediately, like that took some time too. So I don't know what an expectation is as far as timelines. I mean, I think we can, like, overarchingly look at it and say, well, yeah, they need to be back in the College World Series in 3 years, right? But I don't know, like, coming in now, I don't even know how you roster build in baseball.
I mean,
when you lost all your players. I don't know how difficult that's going to be.
I would say strap in. I mean, it's going to take a while. I mean, honestly, I really think that. I mean, I don't think that Brian Green is going to have an issue with building a team, right? He's going to have a roster. I just don't know how good of a roster it's going to be right off the bat in the American this season. And that's the disappointing thing to me. And, there's countless, conversations and discussions about whether or not these high caliber, these talented players would have entered the portal regardless if they would have left, even if Lauren Hibbs would have been retained. I don't know that definitively. I don't know the answer to that definitively. If you listen to different folks talk, it sounds like that probably would have been the case. I don't know that to be absolute gospel fact, but it's disappointing to me when you've got some players that are really, really talented, not just Peyton Tolley, but other players on this roster, some pitchers like Clark Candiotti and, others that have entered the portal. It's going to be disappointing to me if this rebuild takes a long time, or let's just call it for what it might be. I don't know, but call it for what it might be, that it doesn't get rebuilt at all. And you're like, you stripped it down to the studs, down to the foundation, with no guarantee that you're ever going to get it back to even the point where it's at right now. That's the major risk, is that, they're not a great program right now. I mean, they finished 5 games over 500 and got eliminated in the conference tournament and missed the postseason. So I get that. I understand that's not acceptable, but there's no guarantee that they can even get back to that point with this new leadership and the roster and all of that.
If that point is not good enough and people aren't going to the games anyway, like, what risk is there? And I think for me, like, that's what I've really tried to ponder. Like, what is the risk? Because what's been there, and I'm not even talking about wins and losses, because there have been pockets of really nice regular seasons, but that's still not putting butts in those seats.
I know.
So I don't know what the risk is, because the risk to me is, like, people don't come to the games. People aren't coming to the games anyway. And so, like, that's where I think this decision has to be looked at less personally and more businesslike, right? And if you strip it all away and say, let's just make a business decision here, you've got this amazing facility. Watch the College World Series right now. Watch these regionals. There's nothing better than you find at X Stadium. There isn't. Look around. It's not better. And so you look at that and you realize how much individual talent, whether it was Todd Butler or Eric Wedge or whatever, that has been through. Like, there have been really, really talented players come through Wichita State in these years of no success. So my guess is that those really, really good players will still be attracted to the opportunity and to the facilities. And so that gives me some hope. And then the other part of it is, like, what does it take to regenerate buzz for college baseball? Like, what will that need to take? And that's a part of it I also don't understand. Like, for basketball, we have some idea, right, of the needs for a change to be made as far as, fundraising and booster pleasing and all of those things. I don't know what that is in baseball. I would venture to guess that the NIL component in baseball will have some, if not a very large, indication on how quickly this can happen for Brian Green. I don't know what kind of grasp on that he has. But, part of the Brian Green hire, I would suspect, and again, I haven't talked to him. You guys did, but part of the reason I think that, he was probably hired is because there's some hope from Kevin Saul's perspective that he can also build the buzz around the program again as much off the field as on the field, would be my guess, right? And that's got to be priority one. Like, what can you do to get people excited about games again? Winning is obviously a big part of that, but they've had years of individual success. Now, not to the postseason, but even in those regular seasons, I mean, there were years with Todd Butler where they won a bunch of games with really talented players, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, I think that's – you asked what the risk was. I think the risk is going through this again in 2 or 3 years. I think that's the major risk, right, where, we revisit this and we're right back to the well in a couple of years. I hope that doesn't happen, and I don't want anybody to misconstrue my thoughts on this as I'm rooting for this to fail, because I'm not. I want Shocker Baseball to be successful. I was a kid when the Shockers won the College World Series, and it was incredible. Shocker Baseball was where it was at growing up, and I want it back to its glory. I genuinely do, and I really, really want Brian Green to be the guy to make it happen. I mean, the decision's been made. He's the guy. He's the coach. Let's get it done. The problem is right now where I stand, where I sit, I have a really hard time finding a lot of optimism. And that's going to be the challenge that Brian Green has moving forward and building this roster and going into next season, is finding ways to make the fan base optimistic again, to give them hope again. Right now, and especially with Peyton Tolle entering the portal, I have a hard time finding optimism right now. Doesn't mean that I can't find it, but I need to see something, and he's got a lot of work cut out for him in the next couple of months. I want to see, some big things happen where then I can say, all right, cool. I can feel the momentum. I can feel the progress. Let's go and get it.
We can say this with an absolute. It was not good with Eric Wedge, right? It did not work at all. It wasn't happening. So like that risk happened. I think that was the biggest risk in 2014 when Todd Butler was hired, right? And it just hasn't gone since then the way it's needed to. So I don't know how much risk that, because we've been there twice already now. And look, there were years again. Todd Butler went through a 2-year stretch where they were 21-14 games over 500 back-to-back years. And it just still wasn't enough, to get the buzz going for the program again. Now, it was, better attended than it has been in the last few years, but I don't know, outside of returning to regionals, what will do it for Wichita State baseball, because it hasn't been elite players. They've had that. I mean, they've had a lot of that. It hasn't been, above average regular seasons. That hasn't been good enough because they've had that. And outside of conference championships and outside of, postseason play, I just don't know what it's going to be. And here's the elephant in the room, Tommy, and we can take a break. This is the biggest thing I've wondered now for 2 or 3 years. is Wichita geographically going to be able to compete with the South? And weather matters, and it sometimes sucks to go to X Stadium when the shadows are out and it's cold in May still. That's a problem too, and I don't know how much that landscape has changed. I don't know how much impact that has. It has some impact. Nobody wants to go to a cold, windy game on a Tuesday night, right? Wednesday night. So that's the other piece of it that I wonder about constantly. Like how much, in our evolving and changing society is going to midweek games when it's cold outside. That's difficult to do anyway. So that's where, the buzz and the program building off the field has to really, really take off and reprioritize, because I think just on the field by itself, outside of like a College World Series run, hasn't been enough. There have been years of that. Hadn't been good enough. So what happens to get people in the stadium for fun? Just for fun. That's going to be a big piece of what Brian Green and Kevin Saul have to do from day one now in this new regime. Let's take a quick break. 869-1240. Sorry about that. We'll do a lot of this today as we get caught up sort of on some of these big stories, but I'm curious to see now the roster building and how quickly that happens, because, again, I'm flying blind on that with most people. I have no idea what to expect, or, I don't have a set of expectations because I don't know where to put them. 869-1240. If you do, let us know on the IHOP hotline. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to react to the Live Golf Tournament merger a little later in the show. We want to get to the other big news item from the weekend, though. We told you Peyton Tolley's transferring out from Wichita State Baseball. For KState men's basketball, they get a big one transferring in. We'll talk about that next on Sports Daily.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita's #1 sports talk radio.
Forever Lawn South Central Kansas has the best reputation in the Midwest for artificial turf projects of all sizes. Forever Lawn sports grass is requested by both schools and homeowners and can be installed at football fields, baseball diamonds, bullpens, and even indoor training facilities. Can't get grass to grow or tired of paying outrageous water bills? Forever Lawn South Central Kansas can even repair existing artificial and natural sports surfaces. Ready to see what Forever Lawn can do for you? Call 316-688-0722. Tell them you heard about them on KFH.
Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 550-0000.
I'm attorney Ben Winters with Patterson Legal Group. After being hurt in a car wreck, you need to hire the right attorney. How do you find the right attorney? You look for one that has experience and, most importantly, results. Patterson Legal Group has recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for injured people. In a wreck, need a check? Call us today.
Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 550-0000.
Pizza John's, open since 1969. Dine in Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. at 208 South Baltimore in Derby. Give them a call at 788-2011 or go online at pizzajohnsderby.com. Pizza John's, purveyors of round meals and flat snacks.
Join us at Odyssey as we all do our one thing. Together millions of things for our planet. When buying toys for your pet, look for natural materials like cotton, rope, wood, or bamboo. When we each share our one thing, it becomes a million things for our planet. What's your one thing?
This is Micah Lewis, Program Manager for Junior Achievement, inviting you to help inspire and prepare students toward their financial success. JA teaches financial literacy and entrepreneurship to students in kindergarten through high school. Our programs are volunteer-led and business community funded. For more information on volunteering, find us online at kansasja.org, and we're glad Odyssey serves.
Celebrate your birthday at Hook and Reel Cajun Seafood Restaurant. Enjoy a free birthday boil, including your choice of seafood and sauce, with corn, potatoes, and cheesecake. Get the details and eat for free on your birthday at Hook and Reel at Town East Square, Kellogg and Rock.
Being a baseball play-by-play broadcaster demands a blend of learned mechanics, intense preparation, and a calm sense of entertainment. How hard is it to do this job? Let's talk to the ones who do it. This is Matt Spiegel. My new podcast, The PBP, Voices of Baseball, will bring those conversations to you as the best working and former broadcasters tell you why and how they do it. New episodes come every Thursday all summer long. Follow the PBP, Voices of Baseball, on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your podcasts.
Lowe's knows the best deals for Dad. That's why this Father's Day, you can shop our best gifts from the brands he loves for less. Help Dad power his next big project by getting him a Cobalt 24-volt Max drill kit, now only $89. And save up to 40% on select tools and accessories. Shop Father's Day deals today in-store and online. Lowe's knows dads. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid through 6/14 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hey guys, this is Keenan Thompson. I have a problem with you. Yes, you. None of y'all told me that AutoTrader has millions of new and used cars that I can shop from home. I thought we were friends. I put smiles on your face, but I'm not smiling. No one told me that with AutoTrader, a dealer can deliver cars to my home or that I could shop by price on AutoTrader. No one. Consider this friendship that you just learned we had officially over. Finally, it's easy. AutoTrader.
Dazzling decal on Daisy's Donuts window. Bold banner at Barry's Barbershop. Prominent poster at Penny's on Park Place.
This is your sign. Well, signs. To try Staples and see the difference. Get $15 off signs, banners, and posters when you spend $75 or more.
From Staples, and I couldn't miss it.
N617. Visit staplesconnect.com/printbig for details.
At Lowe's, we're always bringing pros more ways to save. Right now, buy a DeWalt 20-volt Max brushless drill kit for just $99. That's $60 in total savings. Plus, earn up to 3 times the bonus points per dollar when you buy select, eat, and multi-packs. Shop in-store or online for deals you can't beat. Because Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. Valid 6/1 through 7/5 while supplies last. U.S. only. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. Valid through 6/30. Subject to change.
Imagine a career where you see your work every time you look up into the sky. At Textron Aviation, we make world-class Cessna and Beechcraft aircraft, and we're looking for people to join us. Explore the possibilities at txtav.com/careers.
Brought to you by Textron Aviation. Explore the possibilities at txtav.com/careers.
Dude, you gotta hear this.
Go ahead. I think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jacob Albrock, Tommy Castor with you here on this Monday edition, this catch-up edition for me. Has been gone for a week. Tommy and I haven't been on the same airwaves in 2 weeks. It's been a crazy June, end of May into June. And it'll just, this is sort of how the summer is. It's been wild. We got back in, landed yesterday afternoon, and you're scrambling to get the grass cut, which is a jungle because you've been gone for a week, and get kids all caught up, and we got to turn around and hit the road again later this week. Man, I got to tell you, this is punishment. As Tommy sits here on fumes with the newborn baby. And then we get all these news bombs falling right into our laps. The big one yesterday, and it's a big one, is for Kansas State Baseball. And we wondered, how much do we need to be concerned about how slow the offseason has moved for the Wildcats? Well, they get a big one. Arthur Kaluma, in a lot of ways, one of the biggest remaining, a very lengthy forward who was really good at Creighton last year, about 12 points and 6 rebounds a game. Not a great three-point shooter, but they got a great three-point shooter in Tyler Perry, remember, and that, should alleviate some of that. I still do think they need a shooter or two, but they've got their potentially their point guard, and now they've got a potential replacement for Keontae Johnson. If you're just looking skill set to skills, or size to size, I should say, and of course Naquan Tomlin's coming back. So with Kaluma now and Tyler Perry and Naquan Tomlin, Tommy, I think we're beginning to see the makings of a roster now that you can sort of take a sigh of relief to see. Now, they're not done yet, and there's still plenty of players out there. They're not finished, and they do need to go get some pieces. But just like last offseason, even if things move slow in the portal, that's not the end of the world. And KState has had 2 really quality transfers. And remember, they had one of the best classes they've had ever coming in this year, too. So I think K-State now fans can feel a whole lot better, and it doesn't look like a roster by any means it's going to be like last place in the Big 12 or anything like that. They're getting to a very competitive roster, it feels like to me.
Yeah, I was starting to get a little bit antsy. I want to see some movement in the portal from Jerome Tang. And this is basically as as good as you can get. I mean, he was, I think at the time of his commitment over the weekend, was the second best transfer left in the portal, I believe, if memory serves correct. And they had been linked to a lot of different players. I mean, think back to like LJ Cryer was somebody that had visited Manhattan. Max Asmus had visited Manhattan, and he was considering Kansas State. Ernest Uday had been linked to K-State, and they hadn't gotten any one of those players. They've got Arthur Kaluma, who was a big-time player with Creighton, and you mentioned kind of the Keontae Johnson replacement. That was the first thing I thought of was, okay, well, cool. Like, this is kind of the new Keontae Johnson for Kansas State. So all in all, this is a big-time get for Jerome Tang. This really helps round out the starting lineup when you've got him and Tyler Perry who can shoot the three, and Naquan Tomlin is back. You would think that David Gasson is probably going to have a more expanded role next season too for Kansas State. Cam Carter also on that roster. So I like that signing. I think that that's a good fit for Kaluma to go to K-State. And at this point, I think Tang has got himself a pretty solid roster.
CBSSports.com has Kaluma ranked 13th, Perry ranked 12th in their transfer rankings. So that is a nice, handful of players. West Virginia's had a nice portal year. Houston's had a really interesting portal year. This is going to be really, really, really difficult to follow until we just see teams. And that's okay, right? Like that, I know that's unnerving, and we may not like it tremendously, but I think we're just not used to it, Tommy. Like, we have so much expectation. I just always have to go back to, like, was anybody less, excited about the college basketball season last year than any other year? Because I don't think so. And I think at the bottom, at the end of it, you just got to see how your team plays and if they're good. Look at how quickly K-State was on board with this team last year, and and selling out. Or they didn't know anything about anybody except for Ish Massoud and Naquan Tomlin. Sorry, not Naquan Tomlin, Marquise Noel. And we didn't know a whole lot about them. We obviously didn't know how good Noel was going to be, and people were on board with it. So I think we just, you got to get there. You see the team play. I think they've got the makings of a pretty talented group here. You've got a guy that's on NBA radars with Tomlin, and then these two transfers coming in, a really talented freshman class. And I think they do need a piece or two still out of the portal that they'll go get. And again, listen, I've been the one sounding the alarm here a little bit for K-State. Like, we got to see something here. Well, we're seeing it now. I mean, we've seen it twice now. And Tomlin coming back was, I think, the biggest piece of news they were going to get all offseason anyway. So you add that with the freshman class, I think you go find yourself, some handy, experienced players, now that don't have to be headline guys, and you feel pretty good about it.
We talked to Tim Fitzgerald on Thursday about Naquan Tomlin returning to K-State and coming out of the draft, going back to Kansas State, and what sort of impact he can bring to the Wildcats next season. And, I think that he's got an opportunity to, really showcase his game. I think he got some probably really good feedback going through the draft process on what he's got to work on if he wants to take his game to the next level. And I want to see that translate into, a more impact player at the college ranks next season for Kansas State. So, they've got some big time transfers now with Kaluma and Perry. But I really am looking at Tomlin as a guy that can take that next big step forward next season for Kansas State.
He will. I don't know what that next step is, though, as a college basketball player. I mean, he's going to get better, I think. But for him, it's always been about, like, this, what could be or what might be. I don't know what that translates to. It probably, honestly, it probably translates in a best case scenario to something that's sort of similar to what we saw to Keontae Johnson last year. But Keontae Johnson was a far more seasoned player with a very different, body type. So is Naquan Tomlin capable of that? I'm not sure. But the role is certainly there. And I don't know if that's what he's best suited for. I think we still have to see that. Like, what is he going to be best suited for? But I know now that, 3/5 of their starting lineup is going to be pretty dang good. Yeah. And they have some freshmen, and if those guys mix in, and remember, we're talking about freshmen now of a caliber that K-State hasn't seen a lot of. We're talking about, blue chippers. So, think of it more in line with what you see at Kansas, right? Like, can freshmen step into one or two roles in a starting lineup? That's sort of what you look at with K-State, with the caliber of guys that they were able to bring in, remember, last year, that are coming in as freshmen now.
Are we looking at a Kansas State roster, do you think, that could compete for a Big 12 championship? I mean, we know where Kansas is. We know they brought in Hunter Dickinson, and, they've got they're more than likely going to be the preseason number one in America. So with the addition of Arthur Kaluma now at Kansas State, does that get you over the edge that they can be competing for a Big 12 championship?
Here's what I'll say. Yes, maybe, but you got to remember Kansas is going to be a prohibitive favorite. Texas added Asmus and should be really good. Baylor and Houston have sort of just like traded players around, so I think they'll both all still be really good, but maybe a little bit different. And West Virginia's added some dudes, man. And so I don't know. Yes, I think they can be competitive. I think we should expect them to be a top half team. I don't know that anybody's going to be considered a favorite ahead of Kansas with the way things have fallen for them this offseason. But, yeah, I could see it for sure. I think the Big 12's going to be really good again, though. I don't know. The planets aligned last year. Does that happen twice? I think you have to build in just a tiny bit of regression there. You did lose 2 All-Americans. So even if these guys are really, really good, you lost 2 All-Americans.
Yeah.
I think that they can compete for the top of the Big 12. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say, yeah, they'll be in the mix for a Big 12 title, because I think the league looks really good again, and I just think Kansas has had such a good offseason. It's hard to put anybody in there over Kansas.
I do think another point in this entire Arthur Kaluma transfer storyline that is really important that we haven't talked about is the fact that Jerome Tang and Kansas State beat out Kentucky for the services of Arthur Kaluma. And so I think NIL plays a role in that for sure. I think the coach, going and playing for Jerome Tang over John Calipari, that maybe had something to do with it as well. But I don't think that, I don't think you can overstate the importance of the fact that you've got a high caliber transfer in Arthur Kaluma committing to play for a program like Kansas State over a blue blood like Kentucky. And I don't know if that tells you more about Kansas State and what Jerome Tang has built there, or more about Kentucky losing out, on a guy like Kaluma. And so I think that that's an important part of this entire story as well, that now we've got a situation, and there's an example of it now where Kansas State can hang and recruit in the transfer portal with big-time programs like Kentucky.
Kentucky's got a weird class. Kentucky's still so freshman heavy. It's not going to work in today's basketball. Did you know, as we just look at these rosters and teams, did you know Kirk Creesa transferred to West Virginia? Arizona?
No, I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
There's so much of this where you're like, wait, what? Like, who did what? I don't know what to make of it. It's going to be hard to follow, and I think all we can do is look at the teams that we follow, closely, and say, net gain, net loss, right? Are they better in this spot than they were last year, or are they worse? If you just try, so Kansas State, I don't think they're going to do anything in the portal that you sit there and say net gain, right? When you lose 2 All-Americans,
yeah.
So I think that's what, but. Also, I think the rest of the roster could be better. So it certainly won't be as top-heavy. It certainly could be more it certainly could be deeper than it was a year ago. What does that mean to wins and losses? Don't know. Because it's again, everything fell Kansas State's way last year. So I don't think you can count on that by any means. So then you have to say, okay, well, how do you replace all the production from those 2 guys? I don't think, singularly these 2 transfers, Perry and Kaluma, will do that, because I don't think they're as good of players. But I do think them with some, increased production out of Tomlin and perhaps some freshmen that we haven't seen play at all yet stepping up, I think there's a chance K-State's as good. Do they make a Final Four run? That's always unfair, right? Like, you can't look at it that way. But you just look at it, kind of look back to the regular season and say, will next year's team have a chance to be as good as last year's team? I think they're close. I'm not ready to put them there yet, but I think they're close.
It's kind of like with KU. They lose Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick, and then if you don't get Hunter Dickinson, then it's hard to say that it's a net gain, of an offseason. They get Hunter Dickinson. I think you can then say, all right, this is kind of a net gain in the offseason for the
you
Jayhawks.
Get color back, right? Yeah.
Exactly, right. And then on the flip side with Kansas State, you lose Noel, you lose Johnson, and you're replacing them, for lack of a better term, replacing them with Tyler Perry and now Arthur Kaluma. I think it might be. I don't want to say it's a wash because those were two All-Americans, and Perry and Kaluma aren't quite at that level, but I do think that they've got the overall players now where they can feel more confident in, saying, okay, we've got ourselves a fairly complete roster now. We can go and compete.
Keontae Johnson was an All-American caliber player when he came in. Marquise Noel wasn't, right? Marquise Noel, remember, Nigel Pack left and everybody was panicking.
Yeah.
And Marquise Noel came in increased production on one of the Big 12's best players. So anything's possible in a new opportunity. And I think that these guys are going to come in and be given an opportunity to improve. And I think you got to consider that too, because the staff through 1 year did that for just about everybody on the roster. Almost all the players that came in got better under this staff. So I think you can bake some of that in there too. And I think you see probably a higher floor and a lower ceiling. And that's not bad. For KU, you lose Grady Dick, you lose a lottery pick, and you lose Jalen Wilson, one of the the all-time great KU players. But you can see a path where the team is better, which is crazy, but it is, right? Because they do replace the production, and the roster just makes more sense. So I think there's all kinds of different ways. And then take Wichita State, for example. That's a total rebuild, right? Like that, we're starting all the way over for them. But I think we've been pretty pleased with what's coming in. I just think it's going to be really difficult until you see teams. Now, I do think you can get a gauge on it pretty quickly. I do think we've learned that over the last 2 or 3 years of the transfer portal era. Like, you can see it, not right away, but pretty soon, right? For a lot of these teams, like, yep, this is going to work, or, oh boy, that's not a good mix. Like, there's going to have to be some work done there. But KState gets the big one. One of the biggest players remaining in the portal. It really helps solidify a class now, and I think ease some tension. We'll certainly have more on that later this week with Tim Fitzgerald, but a sigh of relief for K-State fans here today. And there's still some players out there, I think, that can move the needle for sure. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. We'll continue to play catch-up here. We'll look ahead to the NBA Finals as well. Got to get some thoughts on this LIV, because Tommy and I have not talked off the air yet about thoughts on this LIV PGA Tour merger. Tommy's a big golf guy. I'm less of a golf connoisseur in that way, but I have overall thoughts on what this might mean just in general terms. But we'll get into all of that. Your calls on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll have more Sports Daily coming right at you.
Out Loud Mornings with Bob and Tom on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita's most listened to sports radio. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
Brought to you by Forever Lawn.
There's never been a better time to save big on brand name furniture and mattresses than right now during Crazy J's huge $1 million inventory liquidation sale. Living room, dining room, and bedroom groups, mattress sets, bunk beds, and so much more. All 50% off store-wide while supplies last. No exclusions. Shop early while selection is best. Open 7 days a week at 1026 South Oliver or west at 604 North Tyler. Wichita's favorite furniture store since 1997. Crazy J's Furniture and Sleep Shop.
The sanest deal in town. Who makes your first impression all it can be? Pave the way.
Are you looking to replace or repair your pavement, or perhaps install a new driveway or parking lot? Call Pave the Way, the pavement professionals, at 316-990-5855 today for a fast, free estimate for all your asphalt and concrete needs. Or visit them online at pavethewayusa.com.
Pave the way. Kicking asphalt every day.
I'm Ben Winters. I'm not an actor. I'm an attorney. Really. If you've been hurt in a wreck, don't make the mistake of assuming insurance companies are on your side. They're not. That's why you need the best representation in Wichita. And according to the Wichita Eagle, Patterson Legal Group is the best law firm in town. We've recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for our clients. In a wreck, need a check? Call us today.
Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 550-0000.
Do you have 3 ex-wives and your current trophy wife wants a life insurance policy 3 times the size of the policies you had to purchase for your previous mistakes? If so, you need to call Big Lou at Term Provider, 800-700-6898. Big Lou is intimately familiar with your problems, and if you're 50 or 60 years old and in reasonably good health, a $1 million policy should only cost about $100 to $200 per month. Big Lou may have a solution for your previous policies as well. You may even save enough money to lighten the load on your new $1 million policy. Remember, call Big Lou. He's like you, except he's only on number 2. Call Term Provider at 800-700-6898. That's 800-700-6898 for $1 million in term life insurance that you can live with. Call Big Lou at 800-700-6898. 800-700-6898.
Looking for an adventure? Find yours in a Toyota truck. Like a Tacoma, the ultimate off-road machine. With available crawl control, you'll tackle anything in your way. Or an electrified Tundra with more power than ever before and a spacious high-tech cabin that puts you in charge. Or go with the legendary 4Runner, always reliable and durable over the toughest terrain. No matter your adventure, Toyota has you covered. Visit buyatoyota.com for more, and let's go places.
Being a baseball play-by-play broadcaster demands a blend of learned mechanics, intense preparation, and a calm sense of entertainment. How hard is it to do this job? Let's talk to the ones who do it. This is Matt Spiegel. My new podcast, The PBP, Voices of Baseball, will bring those conversations to you as the best working and former broadcasters tell you why and how they do it. New episodes come every Thursday all summer long. Follow The PBP, Voices of Baseball on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your podcasts.